I added a photo from the 2022 Ironman 70.3 Texas. My name is Scott Flathouse. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Let's get started. So last year I went out to Galveston and I photographed the Ironman 70.3 Texas, and I took almost 8,000 photos, and so these are some of the photos that I took, and I've already applied some edits to these, but let's go ahead and pick one out. So this is Terry, and I like this photo because Terry has she's made it to the turnaround and she's on her way back to Moody Gardens, and I'm over here taking pictures by the side of the road, and she's turned, she's flashing me a smile. She may not be smiling very much longer because she's fighting a terrible headwind this year. But I like this photo because it's crisp, it's in focus. And one of the ways I like to check to see that it's in focus is I'll zoom in here on their watch. And if I can read the numbers on the watch, then I know that it's a pretty good focus. But everything else is pretty crisp and in focus. I can see the numbers on the stickers, and you can even see in the reflection, you can see my car parked, or my truck parked by the side of the road, and I think that little blue dot in her visor is me. So let's take this photo. So like I said, I've already applied some edits to it, but we're going to create a virtual copy so we can start over. So I'm going to go up here to Photo, Create Virtual Copy, and we're going to go to the Develop module and hit Reset. And what that's going to do is just reset it to the settings straight out of the camera. And I'm going to do this one more time just so we have a reference to work off of. All right. And I'll show you why I did that here in a second. Okay, so straight out of the camera, the first thing that I look at is the horizon, and it looks pretty level to me. And but we're going to check it anyway. So the way I do that is I go to the crop and straighten, and the shortcut key for that is R. And we'll take this little level and we'll just drag it across the horizon. And it looks pretty level, yeah. So it didn't really do anything. So I did a good job in camera on keeping the horizon level. Okay, and I may go ahead and crop this down further because if I want to post this to Instagram, it'll be square. But I'm going to leave it for now. Some of the things I don't like about the photo is this kind of wood sticking up here. I can fix that, but we'll leave it for now. And the sky here is totally blown out. So with my camera settings, I had to decide, had to make some choices here, because if I expose for the sky, then she would be very dark. She's already pretty dark. We're going to fix that. But the sun is up here to the left and a little bit behind her, so you can see where the shadow is. And so she's quite a bit backlit. Not ideal, but it's still something we can kind of work with. And so let's see if we can start recovering some of the sky, and then also improving the exposure on her. So the first thing I'll do is take the highlights and just drag those down. So you can see the sky is darkening a little bit. Doesn't do too much. But when I drag the shadows up, you can see that it's really improving the exposure on her. Okay. When I do that though, it tends to flatten things out, and I need to add a little bit of contrast backs, and then the blacks are kind of washed out and gray. So we'll take the blacks back. So that adds a little more contrast, so I'm kind of digging that. Play with the whites a little bit. Can't really do too much with the whites because they're all going to get clipped. maybe add a little bit of contrast. Yeah. One of the ways I like to add contrast is go down here to this dehaze. And when I do that, you can see the darks really start getting darker. But the interesting thing that happens is that I'm starting to get some detail back in the sky, and it looks like there's actually some clouds in the sky that we could work with. But I really don't like the way that that darkened her back up, and I sure don't like the way that affected her skin tone. So I'm going to drag the shadows back up, and I've gone about as far as I can with the shadows here. And on this dehaze, let me show you what it looks like when we go too far. And obviously that looks horrible. But the other thing that's become apparent is how dirty my camera sensor is. So you can see all these little dots here in the sky, and that's my camera sensor. May not be a big deal because I'll probably replace the sky anyway in Photoshop. I'll show you guys how to do that. But while we're here, let's go ahead and take care of this anyway, because it's kind of embarrassing for me. And the way we do that, so Lightroom has some cool tools to be able to handle that. So we'll go to the healing brush, and then we go down here to visualize spots. And so then the spots in the sky and clear open spaces become really apparent. So I'm going to go through here and just really quickly clean these up. Whoops, this one is there we go. So Lightroom picks automatically where it thinks that it can find a clean area and paste it over these spots. Usually it does a pretty good job. Sometimes not so much, and sometimes you got to help it a little bit. There we go. That's why it's important to keep your camera sensors clean, guys. Oh, one more over here. Okay. So then we can click out of that module, and it does a pretty good job of cleaning that up. You can see I missed a couple. Let's do that one. Maybe that one. Okay. So like I said, this is way too much. Let's drag this back. Spots are really hard to tell when you don't have the contrast cranked all the way up, but that's something that I like to take care of regardless. Okay. All right, so here we are. And let's see how far we've come. So we can hit the backslash key, which is right above the return, and we can see how much better things are. So I kind of like it. All right. So another thing I'll do, of course, is enable profile corrections. And I'll usually do that when I import all the photos anyway. But when I reset it, it took that away. And then sometimes I'll go down here to the calibration and adjust the calibration to get the colors. And I kind of like the way that the colors look now, but that green in the grass is a little too much, a little overbearing. So I might decrease the green primary some. And when I do that, that allows me to bring the reds back. And so that's going to increase the saturation in her skin tone and in the pink on her kit and the water bottles and such. And then I'll probably bring the blues up too. When I bring the blues up, that's also going to bring the greens back some, so I can kind of work these. And this calibration, sometimes it's not quite apparent what it's going to be doing, and so I've played with this a lot, so I kind of have a feel for it. And we can turn it off and on. It's pretty subtle, but I'm really starting to bring out some of the reds and pinks, make those a little more saturated, improve the skin tone, but at the same time taming that kind of green yellow. Okay, so I've gone about as far as I think I can in Lightroom. There are some other things that we could do, but I think what I'm going to do is let's go into Photoshop now. All right, so here we are in Photoshop. And the first thing that I'm going to do is let's go ahead and replace the sky. So, and I'm going to use Photoshop's built-in sky replacement. I've played with this a lot. I have a manual technique for replacing the sky, but I kind of like the way that Photoshop has given us this tool. I didn't like it at first, and I've worked with it a lot, and I've kind of figured it out. So when you hit the sky replacement, it brings up this module, and it will put a sky in. There's a kind of a default. This may have been the last one that I worked with, and this obviously does not look good. So let's pick a sky that might kind of fit. So Photoshop has some default skies, and I've also loaded some of my own skies in here. So I go around and take pictures of clouds and things, and I've got a sky library, and so I've loaded a bunch of these up in the sky replacement. So I have these available to me. And so what we'll go through here is and find a sky that looks like it might fit the scene. And we can tweak it some too. So not feeling that one really. So I want to find a sky that has the sun maybe in the same relative position. The light is coming from, I kind of like that one. The light is coming from the left here, and so you can see on these clouds the light is also coming from the left. Colors are a little bit off, but I kind of like the way that she's framed up in the middle of these clouds. So that one's pretty good. Let's try this one. Kind of like this one, and then you can also move this around. So the other thing you want to do is try to match up the horizon. So that one's pretty good. I'm just cycling through here, just no. Okay, which one was the one that I kind of liked? That one's a little too much clouds. Let's go back. So I'm just showing you here how easy it is to kind of do some tests. Okay, let's do this one. All right, so the other thing about these clouds, so when I go around and I take pictures of the skies, I try to make sure that that I bump the focus so the clouds are slightly out of focus, as they would be since they're so far away. And I'll show you what it looks like. Let's find one of the default ones that Photoshop has. So here, the clouds are all in focus, and that just doesn't look right. Because as close as she is, as far away as the clouds are, then they would be normally out of focus. Okay, so let's go back to the one I picked out. Actually, I kind of like this one. Let's do this one. Now let's do this one. Okay. Come on, Scott. Let's pick one and choose. Let's stick with it. All right, here we go. This one. We're going to do this one. All right, so even though I kind of like the way the clouds look, the blues are a little bit off, and it's still a little bit dark, so we can play with a little bit in this module, and then we can work with the layers some once it generates the layers in Photoshop. So I am going to adjust the brightness. So again, really bright day. So to get this to blend, I'm going to bring that brightness up. Let's look at the temperature. I maybe warm it up a little bit. Maybe not so much. I'll look at this fade edge, play with these sliders a little bit, and shift the edge. Maybe not shift it so much, but let's fade it. All right, that looks pretty good. And then I'll play with the foreground lighting some. Yeah, I like it. And then the edge lighting. Photoshop adds what looks like a little bit of spill over from the sky. And sometimes it does a pretty good job, and other times we got to go back and adjust that. So that looks pretty good. Now let's see what it does. So when we go over here to the layer stack, and Photoshop will put this in a nice, nicely labeled group, and we can turn that group on and off. And then let's look at the masks that it generates. So you can see that Photoshop allows some of the sky to come through on the subject and a little bit through on the horizon. And sometimes that looks pretty good, and this one actually comes out and looks all right. But especially where it's really white, you get that bleed through, and I'm not crazy about how it darkens those white areas. So we're gonna adjust this mask a little bit. So the way we do that is go to the brush tool, and then I'm going to change the blend mode on the brush to soft light. And when I'm working on masks, what this does is anything that's 100% white or 100% black, it won't really touch. So if I get a little bit sloppy and I go over here, well, so you can see this, the sky is not 100% white in this case, or the mask on the sky is not 100% white, and so it will affect it, but it provides a little bit of insurance in case I slip or I'm a little bit sloppy. But let's go ahead and just remove all of this from her mask. So I don't want any sky coming through. And as we get closer to the edges, we'll try to be a little more disciplined. I'm gonna make some adjustments to the setting on the brush. There we go. I could use the pen tool and create a nice mask, but I don't think I really need to do that here. And I might be going a little bit overboard. But let's take a look. All right. There we go. Oh, I see a little spot right here. Need to clean up. All right. I think, where was it? There's another spot over here on the mask that I'll just leave that. That looks pretty good. Okay. And it looks pretty good. Photoshop generated some adjustment layers over the sky temperature, sky brightness. I'm going to add one more and call it selective color. And we're going to maybe try to match up the blues a little bit with the water. Take the blues a little bit out by adding some yellow. Make it a little less saturated. Make it a little more cyan, pulling the magenta out. Okay, I'm not having to do too much here. Okay. And then the other thing I'll do is go here globally and add another selective color layer. And what I want to do is really make the pinks and the reds pop. And the way we do that, we pull the cyan out, so that really saturates her skin tone. I'm going to warm it up by adding a little yellow. And then that's going to bring out the color in these little wildflowers that we have along here. And maybe a little too much on her skin. The yellows, we can add a lot of red to the yellows. I don't like that. Sometimes that helps skin tone a little bit too, but I don't think it needs it in this case. In fact, I'm going to pull some yellow out. I really think that the grass and the green yellow is still a little too harsh. Okay. Greens, I'll add some cyan that separates the greens from the yellows. We'll go over here to the cyan. So we already played with the cyans in the sky. I think that matches the water pretty good right there. On the whites, I'll usually drag the blacks off the whites, and you can see that that adds highlights, but that can get burnt out really quick. So I'll only do about maybe -2, -3% there. And then on the blacks, one thing I like to do is pull down the blacks, and this adds a little bit of a matte kind of feel. And if we go up here, let's see if I can show the histogram. Yeah, so when I take the blacks out of the black, that creates clipping here, and it pushes all the blacks up. And obviously that looks horrible, but I do like just a little bit of this, maybe -3, -4%. Okay. So when I turn this off and on, I did a lot with this adjustment layer. Maybe added a little too much red. Let's go back. You can see her face is getting saturated, so add a little bit of cyan back. Okay. All right. So now I think things look pretty good. Let's crop it for Instagram. So we'll go over here to the cropping tool. Pick one. And we'll crop it in here a little tighter. And the important thing to remember here is that when you use the cropping tool, I always make sure that this delete crop pixels is not clicked. And I'm afraid what I might have to do, yeah, so let's go back. Yeah, because in case I don't like the crop, I always want to be able to go back and make changes. So in this case, let's try to use the rule of thirds. Maybe put her helmet and her head right here at one of the intersection points on the rule of thirds. Lots of ways to crop, but I think that looks pretty good right there. So let's save it. And then we can go back into Lightroom. And Lightroom will pull it up, and so then we can compare against the Alright, so there's my Lightroom only edit, and this is straight out of the camera. So we do a side-by-side comparison. And right there I've got a finished edit. And what I would do from here is export it as a JPEG and then load it up into Instagram and write a caption. So thanks for sitting with me to watch me on how I edit a photo from Ironman 70.3 Texas last year.